Hey guys, thanks for joining us for the July newsletter. We hope everyone had a great July 4th weekend. Before we start, I wanted to mention our upcoming hazmat training. This will be a live in-person training and will be held on August 21st. And just in case you can't make this one or are too far away, we will be doing this training again as a webinar in the future. We have lots of pre-built training courses at cnslearninghub.com, so feel free to check those out. So this month, we're talking about brake safety and the CVSA brake Blitz, more truck emission laws, and how to protect employees against mutating viruses. Let's get started. With the heavy focus on climate change, emissions, and more electric cars being released, it's no surprise that there are stricter emission rules being implemented in the trucking industry as well. Needless to say, there are people and organizations that are not happy about it. More specifically, the Western States Trucking Association is challenging the new rule. But what is the rule? Well, on March 29, 2024, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency announced its final rule, which is officially called Greenhouse Gas Emission Standards for Heavy-Duty Vehicles, Phase 3. The new truck emission standards apply to heavy-duty vehicles manufactured between 2027 to 2032 and will vary by vehicle type. But light heavy-duty vocational trucks have the strictest standards, requiring 60% zero emissions by 2032. With that said, the Western States Trucking Association has challenged the new rule and is also asking the court to pause the implementation of the new rule while the challenge is under review. On May 30th, they filed a document asking several questions like, is carbon dioxide considered an air pollutant? Does the new emission rule violate the non-delegation doctrine? And if it violates the major questions doctrine. You know, all the questions we were all wondering, right? The bigger question floating around in our heads is, how will this rule affect commercial motor vehicles? Well, there are 5 major ways. Number 1, it revises certain greenhouse gas standards for 2027 vehicle models. Number 2, it updates elements of the averaging, banking, and trading program. Number 3, it adds warranty requirements for batteries and other components of zero-emission vehicles. Number 4, it requires customer-facing battery health monitors for plug-in hybrid and battery electric vehicles. And number 5, there will be more clarification on certain highway heavy-duty vehicle provisions and certain test procedures for heavy-duty engines. The most important point to hammer home here is that the EPA will require 25% of new sleeper cab tractors to be zero tailpipe emission trucks by 2032. Manufacturers will be allowed to reach the requirement through a variety of technologies, but there's a focus on battery electric, mostly because of price and the current charging infrastructure. On a side note, this is not the only emission standard floating around, and the Western States Trucking Association are not the only ones upset. You remember CARB? Well, the CARB Advanced Clean Truck Regulation would require every truck sold in Pennsylvania to be zero emission by 2045. We had PMTA's Rebecca Euler on our podcast last year to discuss it. Check out that link above. If you have any questions or concerns about these changes, you can always get in touch with us by calling, emailing, or filling out the form below, and one of our DOT compliance specialists will help you out. Last month, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed a long-standing Chevron doctrine. This doctrine said that in a court of law, judges were expected to defer to federal experts to interpret laws that were considered ambiguous or unclear. Basically, with this reversal, federal experts are being removed from the equation. Now, judges will be expected to interpret the law to come to their final decision on a case. With this change, other changes to the regulation process may come as well. It could lead to an increase in legal challenges against federal agency regulations. The increase in legal challenges could force the lawmakers to make these laws clear from the get-go, or they could just end up in longer legal battles. Here's a quick hypothetical scenario on how this might affect the trucking industry. Let's say Congress passes a law mandating testing and treatment for sleep disorders as part of the CDL medical certification. But the text doesn't clearly define what a sleep disorder is. In a following regulation, the FMCSA defined it as an occasional workday nap or midday drowsiness. This is an issue because thousands of drivers would need to go through expensive and time-consuming sleep tests just because they take a nap here and there. So, OOIDA decides to challenge that. Under the Chevron doctrine, challenges to these types of regulations would favor the federal agency's interpretations because they assume that the law is reasonable and they know what they're talking about. But by revising the Chevron doctrine, courts would need to take a closer look at the intent of these laws. In this case, they might say that lawmakers were likely wanting to address severe sleep disorders, not just a daytime nap, and reference a list of those severe sleep disorders from the CDC. There are countless ways the trucking industry could be affected, and this is just one. If you have any questions about this or other regulations, give us a call, email, or fill out the form below, and one of our DOT compliance specialists will be happy to help. As you know, every year the CVSA has their annual Brake Safety Week. This year, it's scheduled from August 25th to August 31st, and they're going to be highly focused on the condition of brake linings and pads. You might remember us talking about this last year because there was a huge decrease in vehicles being placed out of service, 50% actually, but there was also a 50% decrease in the number of vehicles inspected. With that said, no matter how many inspections there are in these blitzes, you still need to be prepared. So how do you prepare? Well, first of all, you need to know your brake system. The better you know it, the more likely it is that you will recognize an issue. Some things you should know are the size and type of the air brake chamber, which should be marked on the chamber itself. Knowing that will tell you the maximum allowable push rod travel for that specific brake chamber, and you'll be able to check if it is in or out of adjustment. You really should be checking everything during the pre- and post-trip inspections, but your brakes are very important and need to be placed very high on that list of to-dos before you jump in and start driving. There are some major parts that you can do a quick visual check on for leaks, damage, or just being properly attached, like your air brake chamber, brake hoses and tubing, cotter pins, clevis pins, slack adjuster, and of course your air lines. Don't forget to check out cnslearninghub.com. We offer a number of courses there that can help with things like vehicle maintenance, pre-trips, and even defensive driving. But if you have general questions, you can always call, email, or fill out the form below and we'd be happy to help you. The CVSA always gives you the dates of Brake Safety Week, and now they were even nice enough to give you some tips on how to pass these inspections. We will throw those tips on screen, or you can check them out in the full article below, but some of them include checking the brake lining and pads, checking for signs of missing lining, checking shoe to drum clearance, making sure there's enough lining on the shoe, and more. Some of the most common out-of-service brake inspection violations have been broken brake drums, loose air tanks, and corroded holes in a spring brake housing, just to name a few. Ultimately, it all comes down to good vehicle maintenance. If your vehicles are maintained regularly, you won't have anything to worry about come inspection or audit time. If you have questions about vehicle maintenance or these inspections, just give us a call, email us, or fill out the form below, and one of our DOT specialists will help you out. So, you've heard us talk about Brake Safety Week. We mention it every year, and it's coming up from August 25th to August 31st. Well, the CVSA also does a Brake Safety Day. This is a one-day enforcement initiative that ended with almost 5,000 inspections and almost 600 truckers being put out of service. Those nearly 600 CMVs were found to have critical brake-related violations. Over 20% of them had service brakes with an out-of-service condition resulting in a defective brake. 73 had steering-related brake violations, and 256 had other violations related to things like drums and air leaks. On another note, there were 108 power units and 66 towed units with lining and/or brake pad violations, which happens to be the focus of the 2024 Brake Safety Week. The CVSA has been offering tips to truckers on how to pass these inspections, and we will throw all those tips on screen, or you can check them out in the full article, but some of them include checking the brake lining and pads as part of your pre- and post-trip inspections, checking for signs of missing lining like grooves in the drum from rivet contact, checking shoe to drum clearance, making sure there's adequate lining on the shoe, and more. We will always inform you of these inspections as they come up, so make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. But if you have questions on vehicle maintenance or preparing for a blitz, give us a call, email us, or fill out the form below. One of our vehicle maintenance specialists will help you out. Okay, so you've heard us talk about this before, and I'm sure you will hear us talk about it again. That's right, we were talking about bird flu or avian flu. It seems to come up around the same time every year, but by the time you watch this video, the issue will be long gone. With that said, it is still important to know what to do in this situation since it will most likely be back next year. Just to give you some background, this newest 2024 case was in Iowa, and it affected over 96 million poultry, almost 10,000 wild birds, and 79 dairy herds. The virus spread to poultry in 48 states and cows in 9 states. And in Sioux County, the USDA confirmed 4 cases of avian flu in humans that were linked to either commercial layer chickens or affected dairy cows. A state of emergency was issued and stayed in effect until June 27th and included hours of service waivers for commercial vehicles and temporary suspension of weight requirements on state highways for emergency response loads. Hours of service waivers are pretty common when there's a state of emergency, so as a motor carrier, you should make sure to stay aware of these issues and the exemptions that follow. If you have any questions about how hours of service exemptions work, you can call, email, or fill out the form below, and we can put you in touch with one of our compliance partners, compliance navigation specialists, and they can help you out. In addition to hours of service waivers for motor carriers, when these issues come up, it's also important to think of any employees that might be susceptible to exposure. As an employer, you need to think about protecting your employees. And in this case, the protection comes with the use of personal protective equipment, or PPE. Even though the CDC said there's no immediate public health threat, it is still highly recommended that employees at farms that house chickens, turkeys, cows, and ducks protect themselves. Taking it a step further, fitting those employees with an N95 mask would ensure full protection if the virus was to mutate. And we all know too well about how viruses can mutate. Thanks, COVID. So for N95 masks to fit properly and to abide by OSHA regulations, employees would need to go through a respirator fit test. There are a lot of details that go into respirator fit testing, so if you're looking to protect employees or follow other OSHA requirements, you can always call, email, or fill out the form below, and one of our occupational healthcare specialists will get you started. Well, that's it for this month. Don't forget to check out cnslearninghub.com for all of our online and live training courses, and make sure to get signed up for our August 21st live hazmat training. Links are below. If you ever have questions, just give us a shout and we'll be happy to help. See y'all next month.